Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Dr. Tom LaHue. Today we're going to be talking about the sin or the passion of Enneagram Type 1, also called anger. So we're going to deep dive into anger, what it is, why it can be a good thing, and why sometimes it can become a problem in our life and in our relationships. And create all kinds of roadblocks that keep us from moving forward in life. Just a reminder, in the description below is a link to my website, tomlahue.com. I offer Enneagram coaching and support. If maybe anger has become a problem in your life and keeping you from moving forward or is affecting your relationships, the Enneagram is a great tool to help us know more about ourselves and also the people that we're in relationship with, to try to learn to get along with one another better. Check out my Present to Life coaching program. Also, I have a lot of different classes available on demand and live on Zoom. I'd love for you to participate in one of those classes on Enneagram coaching or Enneagram relationship coaching. All right, so let's jump into this topic today called, the sin of each type. And we're going to start here with Enneagram Type 1. And, all of my notes, I'm looking at my notes that I printed off here. All of my notes are available to you free. Just go to my website, go to the store tab, and up on the top left-hand side of the store is a free download of an ebook called Shadows of the Soul. So download that PDF, that ebook, and you'll have all the notes in front of you for every one of the 9 types. And I'm going to be using this as my guide to go through these videos. So we're going to talk about type 1s and the dominant sin of type 1s. And first thing I thought is, why don't we just define anger? So here's a good working definition when you think about anger. Anger is a strong feeling of displeasure or hostility that arises as a response of perceived wrongs, threats, and frustrations or injustice. And I think that's one of the reasons, like, we think of 8s as being often like the ones that probably look the most angry, because they're focused on injustice and little justice warriors, making sure that who's to blame for this. But really, 8s, their sin is not anger. They often use anger to cover the more vulnerable feelings that they don't want to experience, like indecision or apprehension or, anything that makes them feel small. But 1s, now you guys, your sin actually is anger. And you can see sometimes, like, counterphobic 6s and other 6s could look very angry. And notice that threats can provoke anger, that feeling like you're threatened, and who's more threatened than 6s. And also you might think of sexual 4s, which Richard Rohr called the angriest type on the Enneagram. Perceived injustice, right? It's not fair, and that sin of envy, the other person, is ahead of me in some way, and I haven't been given a fair deal. And so with all those other types, we need to remember that, the sin of the 1 actually is anger. So anger arises from a response to perceived wrongs, threats, frustrations, or injustice. It is natural, though complex emotion that encompasses everything from mild irritation to intense fury and rage. And I think some of us, like myself and maybe some 9s and maybe a few other types, maybe 5s, we might have to realize that we've allowed ourselves to get angry. Sometimes I have to say to myself, I think what I'm feeling right now is what other people call anger, because I don't naturally want to experience that. It's a negative emotion for me, and I don't want to really experience that. And sometimes I'll just kind of be frustrated or down or depressed or irritated, and I'll have to realize, like, I think I'm angry. Like, I think I'm frustrated that we can't go do all the things I want to do in life. So anger can be triggered by both external and internal events, such as like an argument with a friend or a falling out with someone that you love, a personal setback, remembering a painful experience. And even though we often think of anger as a negative force, and that's primarily how we're going to look at it here, anger can be a good thing. Like, I always try to encourage 9s to get a little more angry. Like, get frustrated with where you're at in life. Get frustrated with the sloth that's holding you back. Anger can be a great motivating force. When I think about type 1s, I think of, for example, like Dave Ramsey, the finance guy. Get mad at your finances, get angry, and use that energy, to bring about change in your life. That's when change often happens in our lives, when we either get really sad about something or we get really angry about something. We decide we're going to lose weight. We decide we're going to start saving money. We decide that we're not content with the way things are. And that discontentment at some level you could describe as anger. So anger isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just we need to be really cautious in how we experience that anger and then how that anger affects the other people in our lives and our relationships. It could have outcomes that could be devastating for us and for our relationships. So, however, uncontrolled and expressed anger can be uncontrolled anger can be expressed in harmful ways. They can lead to problems in relationships, work situations, and overall well-being. And let's just face it, people don't want to be around you. People don't want to be around someone who's angry. It's very hard to have fun and be happy being around somebody who's upset by something all the time. It's wonderful to be around somebody who's not upset all the time. And just realize, like sometimes with ones in particular, is, you can carry around this general energy of frustration and disappointment, very idealistic, and then when things don't reach that ideal standard, the rest of us may have a hard time relating to you. Like we might feel like, I don't know what to say. I feel like I might be walking on eggshells a little bit because I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want to provoke that anger. I don't want to bring all of that back to the surface. So I'm very cautious, or maybe I just avoid. And that may be what happens is people might just avoid interactions with you because, they don't want to upset you, or they obviously see that their presence in your life in some way is causing an offense or a problem to you. I think this could be especially troubling if you were a parent and you love your kids and you want your best for your kids, but your high demands and your rigid perceptions, of the way things ought to be might make living with you quite challenging. I know you love people, I know you love your kids, I know you love your family, but just realize that the way you might come across isn't necessarily the way you might think you're coming across. And that's true for all of us. So let's look at the notes here. Enneagram Type 1s are often called the perfectionists, the reformers. They have a strong sense of right and wrong, a strong sense of the way things should be, what is right and correct, and then they align themselves or comply. You're a compliant type. Comply themselves to that standard. Living for integrity, very purposeful, and a strong core about you. However, the manifestation of anger in Type 1s can be unique. And it isn't always explosive or overt anger. It could often take the more subtle forms, like an internal frustration or a disappointment or dissatisfaction towards injuries that you perceive that are happening to yourself, or just maybe even just seeing people not doing the right thing, seeing people stealing or looting or driving without care. And all of this is going on around you all the time. And this inner critic pushing you towards correcting yourself and also correcting others around you can create turmoil and dissatisfaction in your own life and in your relationships around you. Now, I think, that 8s, 9s, and 1s, all in that anger group or in that gut group, I feel like all three of them are trying to deal with the same problem. And the problem is fundamentally, why are things broken, or why don't things work the way they're supposed to? More about this in my Garden of Eden video. But, I think those three types are all dealing with that same problem. And 8s, they tend to go against, well, why is this broken? Who's to blame? This is ridiculous. Don't tell me what to do. And 9s are more try to be accepting of it, like, yes, everything's broken. Yes, there's problems. But you have to learn to get along. You have to learn to just adjust. You have to learn to be understanding. And I think 1s, the primary focus is on how do we make this right? How do we correct this? How do we improve this? How do we perfect this? Which is great. I mean, realize I'm all for that. That's a wonderful way to orient yourself to all the problems in the world is, well, let's make it better. Let's make sure we show up on time, do good work, put everything away. Just realize, like, when other people don't share that same value as strongly as you do, or in the way in which you think they should, very important word for 1s, it's going to generate within you a general sense of frustration. Like, why are people not complying with doing things the way that they are supposed to be done? And realize, like, a 5 would love to argue with you on this. Like, what do you mean by right? What do you mean by should? What do you mean by they're going to probably undermine and challenge your sense of oughtness and your sense of where does your standards come from. And realize you may not even think about that, like where your standard comes from. It may just be, well, this is the way we've always done it, or this is the way it is most effective, or this is what is familiar. But it may not at all be the most, the best way to do things, but it's your way of doing things. Okay, so I'm kind of digressing here. Let's get back on topic. All right, manifestations of, okay. The root of this anger is a deep desire for perfection and order, or let's say to eliminate disorder. Type 1s have an idealistic vision of how things should be, driven by a belief in a certain moral or ethical standard. When reality falls short, and that's what I think like 5s would undermine, especially 5-wing 4s, the iconoclast. They're going to try to challenge and undermine that standard. Like, where does the standard come from? Is this true for all time? Is this true in every culture? Is this true in every situation? And I think sometimes people get 1s and 5. Sometimes 1s and 5s might confuse themselves. Am I a 1? Am I a 5? I don't know. Both of them could be a little bit of know-it-alls. Both of them could be a little bit of like owners of the truth or the right, correct way of doing things. But 5s would probably differentiate themselves from 1s in that they would maybe argue against a standard, where 1s would desperately seek to have a standard. Like, I want to have a standard. I want to know the right way to do things. And I think 5s would often challenge and undermine that. Like, well, where does that standard come from? And what do you base that on? And what is your belief system? And are you being consistent? And so that's one of the ways I think that you could differentiate between 5s and 1s. Just kind of popped in my head. And, as a 7, monkey mind, I go with it, even when I shouldn't. So have an idealistic vision of how things should be, driven by a belief in certain moral or ethical standards. When reality falls short, which it's going to. Let's just pause for a second and realize it's going to. We do not live in the Garden of Eden, so reality will always fall short of the ideal standard. That doesn't mean it's wrong to have an ideal standard. That's great. Let's all try to move toward an ideal standard, but just with more compassion, more care, more understanding. Look at what the wings are right next to you. 9-wing, understanding, valuing other people's perspectives, not speaking up, listening more, and then your other wings are 2, love, kindness, grace, and just you want to stretch or lean into those wings to help you compensate for when life does not live up to that reality, which of course it's not going to. The people in your life are not going to live up to your standards. They're just not. You don't live up to your standards. They're not going to live up to your standards, and they're going to get exhausted by your standards. And let me say it like this. Rules without a relationship is going to lead to rebellion every time. Rules without a relationship will lead to rebellion. And so if you run a strict house, you run a strict ship, you run a strict business, I get it, man. We all sometimes need that structure around us. Just remember that there's got to be more than the structure. There's got to be love. There's got to be attention. There's got to be affection. There's got to be compassion. There's got to be relationship. Rules without a relationship will lead to rebellion. And probably no one is more susceptible to this than 1s, is because you want to establish this structure around the people that you love to help them and to protect them and to make sure that they're becoming people of character and integrity, which is all fantastic. Realize, man, I look at 1s and I think I need to be more like that. I should be more like that. What a wonderful way to orient your personality. Let's find out what's right and align ourselves with it. Who can argue with that? But you're going to be very frustrated in life when you realize like other people just don't necessarily think that way, or it's not the highest priority in their life. And so a little bit more understanding, a little bit more compassion, a little bit more realizing like this inner voice is not the voice of God. We all have an inner voice, and it's all moving us in different directions. Yours is trying to align with the good, align with what is right, and that is admirable. It is fantastic. Just realize it's not the same thing as the voice of God. So don't act like it is. Take a deep breath and realize I'm a 1. Oh my goodness, I'm such a 1. There I go again. Say phrases like that to yourself. There I go again. Everything is fine the way it is, but look at me trying to, look at me focusing on the two things that aren't exactly right. Because that'll keep you from ever really being present to life, from ever really, being mindful of what is in front of you. It'll keep you very critical of everything, and it'll keep you from being effective. Because at the end of the day, how are you supposed to actually turn your work in when you are overwhelmed with the fear of being criticized or overwhelmed with the fear of getting things incorrect or wrong? It's going to limit you. Look, all the shots you won't take in life. Look back over your life. Look at all the shots that you did not take in life because you were afraid you were going to mess it up. You were afraid you're going to screw it up. You're afraid you're going to bring dishonor, or you were afraid that you were going to, do something stupid and make a mistake. Of course you're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. That's what grace is for. That's what mercy is for. That's what compassion is for. And God gives a lot of that to us, and then we need to internalize that and then make sure that we're showing that in our lives as well to others. Okay? So remember, like at your best, you think, Tom, oh my gosh, you're so crazy. Okay, look, at your best, you look like a 7. Okay? That's all we need to say is at best, you look like a 7. Upbeat, playful, fun-loving, positive, charming, go with the flow, fluid in your thinking. When you look like that, people around you, they can't get enough of you. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, please, more of that. Please be more like that. And I realize you're not going to stay there. You're never going to become a 7. You're never going to inhabit this space, forever. But there ought to be these mountain peaks along the way, these roller coaster, peaks along the way where people get to experience that, because that's you at your best. Now, I'm not trying to, criticize you. I'm not trying to complain about it. I'm just saying, just recognize that the story you're telling yourself is, I need to get it right. I need to do better. I need to put more pressure on myself. But it's exactly the opposite. If you could learn to let it go a little bit, if you could learn to accept the imperfection a little more, if you could learn to laugh at yourself a little bit rather than, berate yourself and criticize yourself, if you could learn to laugh at yourself and say, oh my gosh, I'm such a 1, look at me doing it again, there I go again, and think about leaning into that 9 and leaning into that 2, being more peace-loving, being more gracious, more accepting, you're immediately going to look more like a 7. That's what it's going to do. The outcome is it's going to make you look more like a 7. On the other hand, when you give too much validity to that inner critic inside you, you're going to look like a 4. Disappointed, frustrated, envious, feeling misunderstood, being very moody, becoming overly dramatic. That's what you're going to look like. And it's not that you're being bad, okay? Hear me say that. When you look like a 4 and you're in that 4 space, when you disintegrate the 4, it's not that you're being bad. It's just a witness to us. Okay, he needs a little space right now. She needs a little more understanding right now. Like, this person is suffering, and I want to be as compassionate and gracious as I can to give them space to recover and allow their state to improve. Maybe they need to talk it out. Maybe they need to vent it out. And I don't need to overreact right now because I'm not talking to you in your best state. I'm talking to you in your disintegrated state. Okay. All right, so learning to accept imperfection. So easy to say, right? But I'm not a 1. Both in themselves and in this world, this involves developing patience, cultivating compassion. Look, patience 9, compassion 2. Do you see that? I mean, it's right there. Learning to silence the harsh inner critic and your need to control things, becoming more mindful, becoming more, prayerful, meditation, and less judgmental. Because, doing things the right way is fantastic. It's just when you overplay this, when you overplay it, it's going to come across as harsh, judgmental, critical, and it's going to move people away from you, which is not your goal. I guarantee you that your goal is not, I want to move people away from me. Your goal is, I want to interact positively with people and have the best life possible. Okay, we all are on this journey together, but every one of us, we overplay our strengths and they become challenges or weakness. Here's a quote to you from Aristotle. All right, anyone can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person to the right degree at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not easy. I think that's a great quote when I think about anger and type 1s. Here's a quote from Mark Twain. Anger is the acid that can do more harm to the vessel that it's stored in than to anything on which it is poured out on. In other words, this anger is like an acid that eats inside of you, right? Like you think I need to get, especially 8's like I'm going to get even with that person, or like a 4, I'm going to get even with that person. More like with a 1, I think it's more like I need to show this person they can't get away with something, or the law needs to have justice. But notice this anger is like an acid. It's like when you don't forgive somebody, realize you're still hooked to that person. Like you're still in the jail with them. You might be the warden and they're the prisoner, but you're still stuck in the jail with them. Carrie Heffernan on King of Queens, I think she's an 8, but listen to what she says about anger. I think you'll appreciate it. I'm not mad. I'm just passionate. And when I get passionate, I raise my voice. And when you don't listen, I get more passionate. I think everyone can understand this. She's talking to her husband there. And then here's a quote from a character that I think is a type 1. Frasier, off of the show Frasier and Cheers, I think is a type 1. He says, my anger frightens me, not because I can't control it, but because I know it controls me. And that is a very sobering thought. I think it's very well said, is that the problem with these sins is they do control us. They do. Gluttony controls me. If I'm not careful, it's constant. It's a constant struggle with gluttony. And yours is a constant struggle with anger. I think about a couple of Bible verses. Ephesians 4 says, in your anger, do not sin. I think that's pretty interesting, that anger itself is not necessarily always a sin, but it's the outcomes of it. It might be more like the motivations of it, or the motivations because I'm angry because something is unjust or is oppressive, or I'm angry because I didn't get what I want, or it didn't happen exactly the way I thought it should. Not every reason I get angry for is really a sin. A lot of it's just preference. Oh my goodness, this one idea could change your life. Is it when somebody has offended you, or when something's wrong, is it because they have violated a command? They have done something sinful against you or against society? Maybe, quite possibly. But notice a lot of times what you're angry about is not really a matter of someone sinning against you or sinning against commandments, but is often just preference. Like somebody didn't do something the way you think it should be done. Like they didn't put the plates in the right order, in the right cabinet, the way you think that it should be done. I remember one time working in a church, and the church was older and it had like a bad smell in the basement because it was kind of damp down there. And I found at Goodwill for $20, I found a dehumidifier, and I bought it. And I put it in the basement and attached a hose to it and ran the hose down the drain, turned it on like a low setting. And within just a couple of days, the whole church just lost that musty smell. And it just smelled fantastic in there. And it was a very simple fix. But one of the leaders in that church, who I'm sure now looking back had to be a type 1, the next meeting we got to, he was furious. He was just angry and upset that somebody had done something to the building without his knowledge of it. That this item had been purchased and placed in the building without alerting him or letting him know. And, being maybe a 7, I am, soft rebellious. I said, yeah, I got that. I thought it made the building a lot better. Well, he was just, really honked off that he wasn't included in the decision. He didn't have, any kind of say in it. And I just said, I'm sorry. I thought it made it better. And I just kind of rolled with it. And then it was put to rest. And then I went immediately to the church and took that dehumidifier and took it home. Kind of soft rebellious. Probably I was like, well, fine, you don't want it? Then we'll just take it home. And then it'll just stink. We'll just live in your stink. And I probably shouldn't have done that. I probably should have just, whatever. But that's the kind of stuff where in his mind, I'm sure, like, he was protecting, he was trying to make things right, but it just came across as like, really, that's the right thing? Okay, so in your anger, do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Like, work it out, resolve it. try to work through this. A big part of this too is just you really realizing like, oh, this is a me thing. Like, this is my stuff and I need to own it, and I need to realize that I've got to be careful about this anger thing. And then I think of another verse, James says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Like, be careful. You might feel that impulse to anger immediately, but you want to check that and realize, like, if I allow this to just surface right now, I might say and do things that are going to jeopardize or damage the relationships that I have with the people right now. So I got to be careful. And I think you'll find yourself saying things like this. Wow, I can't believe what I almost said or almost did. Oh my goodness, I'm such a one. There I go again. And see, I think this is good for all the types to kind of catch themselves in that moment. Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. You're like, why are you reading Bible verses to us? This is about sin. It's about sin, and when I think about sin, you got to have some kind of commandments you're sinning against. And so my Christian worldview takes me to the Bible. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. And so, those of us that live with ones or loved ones, we need to be careful that how we respond. It's not all on us, but, if I know you're a one, then it should affect the way I interact with you. And one of the ways is to try to be less critical of you and less harsh with you and more understanding. And then to just realize if you're in that critical, hypercritical, judgmental state, is like, you're just a one being a one right now. You're just a one doing the things ones do. One struggle with anger, and I need to be compassionate with it. And a gentle answer turns away wrath. Okay, and Colossians 3 says, rid yourselves of all of these things. Anger, malice, rage. Yeah. Okay, well, we all have our struggle. And now we've unpacked type 1s a little bit. We're going to go through all the other types and look at them as well. Thank you for joining me for this video. I hope it's helpful, inspiring, encouraging, compassionate, challenging, whatever. I hope it makes a difference in your life. Thank you guys. I'll see you next time. Be present with life.